Its throat was torn out. Its trachea was hanging out. There was blood in the carcass still dripping. And we were a little bit spooked. Secret episode 1076, Sasquatch.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hi friends, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Hey, this episode is likely unlike any episode you've heard on the Adventure Sports Podcast. Matter of fact, I think of it as the secret episode or the unpublished episode. The reason is I recorded this for the Adventure Sports Podcast some years ago when Mason was running the show, and we discussed using this episode on the podcast, but I don't think I ever delivered it to him. If it sounds like I'm trying to build a little bit of mystery around this episode, well, you guessed right. It is a little bit mysterious. This episode is about an extended camping trip that my son and I took, and some really bizarre, hard-to-explain encounters that we had. For those of you podcasters out there, you will recognize that this episode kind of follows a narrative style, and the Adventure Sports Podcast normally follows an interview style. So it's a different approach to podcasting. I'm really curious from the listeners what you think of this approach. Now, I will say this. It takes a lot of time and energy to put an episode like this one together. And while it's unlikely that we will do lots and lots of this narrative style, if you like it and you think it's worthwhile, please leave comments. Let us know. Say, yeah, that was cool. Let's do some more of that. And it can obviously be done with interviews as well. It doesn't have to be just me narrating everything. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit. I usually begin each episode by saying hello, friends, or something like that. I use the word friend, and the reason is because I do count you among my friends. Now, I know that sounds kind of silly because I haven't met most of you, obviously, but we have a connection, and that connection is a love for the outdoors, a love for adventure sports, a love for challenging ourselves, and I know that if we were in the same room together and started swapping tales, we would be instant friends. So anyway, I call you friends, and I'm looking for a little bit more of that friendship connection. So don't ever hesitate to leave comments, get in touch with me. Matter of fact, if you go to kurtlinville.com, you can reach me directly there. You can also reach the Adventure Sports Podcast at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. I would love to hear from you. Give me critiques about how you like the episodes or ideas for things that you may like to hear more of going forward, or maybe just say hi. It would be fantastic to hear from you. So thank you, friends, for being a part of the Adventure Sports Podcast community. By now, most of you have already heard this, but for those who might be a little bit late to the party, I have reacquired the Adventure Sports Podcast from Mason Gravely, who did a stellar job of running the show for about 6 years. But I have taken it back again because Mason's life has changed, his life circumstances have changed, and he just got way too busy to get it all done. He still loves the Adventure Sports Podcast, and I'm so grateful that I get to take the torch back and run this leg of the relay. So you've got me. That's why I'm here hosting instead of Mason. And I want to thank everyone. It's a bit of a transition because it's not just who's hosting the show that gets transitioned here. It's the entire business. And it's been a monumental amount of effort, of course, to transition the business from Mason to me and for me to come up to speed on everything again. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. I mean, the episodes are coming out at different times, and we're trying to keep the same format going. Have lots of plans for the future, actually adding more content weekly, which is a huge challenge since we're already at 2 episodes per week. But I want to say a sincere thank you for sticking with us through this process, and I hope you really enjoy today's show. It might be fun to imagine that we're sitting around the campfire together, and I'm sharing a story about what I've experienced in the past. And who doesn't love a good, slightly scary campfire story? So here it is, the Adventure Sports Podcast, secret episode. It seems like the world has just gone Bigfoot crazy. I mean, think about it. Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot, Ape Man. There have been thousands and thousands of sightings from all over the world, all over the planet, where people swear that they saw something 9 feet tall and hairy that walked on 2 legs, much like a man, but certainly not human. This has gone on for generation after generation after generation. Could it be real? Could Bigfoot really exist? It seems so highly unlikely that a great ape-like species could coexist with humanity for all of these generations and that we would have no actual proof. We just have eyewitnesses, we have stories that are told around campfires at night, and like so many things that are mysterious and unknown and unproven, people love to speculate. And the speculations often get intertwined. Bigfoot, by some, is an alien. This alien travels on UFOs or interdimensionally from other places in the universe and comes to our planet. For what purpose, we don't really know, but they say, oh, there was a Bigfoot sighting and there is a UFO sighting and they were in the same place at almost the same time, and surely these are aliens trying to tell us something important. There are stories about Bigfoot actually hurting people, but most of the stories about Bigfoot have nothing to do with any harm. It's just very curious. Very, very curious. Could Bigfoot be real? I have long been fascinated by things that are just somehow outside of humanity's control. Things like extreme weather or earthquakes or volcanoes. Not that people get hurt, but that these things can't be controlled by us. Humanity has not yet learned how to harness the power or how to keep that hurricane from stopping as it rages across the Atlantic. I feel like these natural events are humbling and mysterious because they often sneak up on us. For generations now, scientists have been trying to learn better ways to predict volcanic eruptions or earthquakes, and they are getting better, but still, we don't know the day, we don't know the hour, we don't know the moment when catastrophe could hit. And this has always fascinated me, not because I'm somehow morbid and I like doom and gloom, but more because there are things that are outside of humanity's control. We don't know enough. That humbling effect is good for us on some level. And then there are other things that we can't prove. Things that go bump in the night, the monster under the bed or in the closet. It's maybe the thing that we blame for unexplained fear of the dark or eerie places. We have swamp monsters, we have the boogeyman, and yes, we have Sasquatch. I grew up many years ago on a 180-acre farm surrounded by thousands of acres of mostly uninhabited forests, prairies, marshes, small mountains full of streams. I spent nearly every moment that I was not doing school or chores alone in these woods. With a decade or more of spending time in nature, growing up with nature as my true home, I suppose it came natural for me, for my boogeyman, to be Bigfoot. After all, I'd seen Bigfoot on the $6 Million Man, though of course that was fake. But the thought of a giant, hairy, non-man but almost man crashing through my window, snatching me from my bed and running deep into the forest with me under his stinky armpit kept me awake more than a few times as a child. And it still seems so very strange to me that there could be thousands of sightings, but yet no real evidence. No one has DNA from a Bigfoot. No one has found a Bigfoot skeleton. No one has found a Bigfoot graveyard. No one has captured a Bigfoot or shot a Bigfoot, with millions of people traipsing through the woods, hunting, fishing, backpacking, camping, exploring. No solid evidence of a Bigfoot. But doesn't it sound fascinating, completely fascinating, that there could be something so elusive and so far out of humanity's control that it could coexist with us for all of these generations, and maybe, just maybe, some of the mythology is real. Some of the mythology could be true. If nothing else, it makes for really good, fun, scary camping stories. and I have a fun, scary camping story for you today. But first, I would like to say one thing more. I know for a fact that very, very rare things do exist. Spending a decade or more, every waking moment that I wasn't in school or doing chores of some sort, deep in the woods, exploring the foothills of the Ozarks, the forests and the streams and the crags, you would think that I pretty much saw everything that ecosystem had to offer. But there was one day, as I crested over a mountaintop, there was a small clearing in the forest, and I disturbed a jackrabbit that jumped up and quickly ran out of the clearing and hid. Why does this matter? Because that part of Oklahoma in the foothills of the Ozarks didn't have jackrabbits. And I had never seen a jackrabbit in all those years. I had heard that the old-timers said, yeah, there used to be jackrabbits, but you know what? There were no more jackrabbits except that one lonely jackrabbit. That one day that I spooked in a clearing after spending a decade in the forest. How rare was that jackrabbit? I don't know, but extremely rare. I saw all sorts of animals all the time in the forest, but only one time did I ever see that jackrabbit and that ecosystem. Why do I bring it up? For me, it stands as proof that the unexpected can happen. It stands as proof that the extremely rare can still exist. You know, I think sometimes we need something to pin our fears on. Sometimes it's difficult to understand fear, especially when it seems unjustified or somehow irrational. And we make up stories, the archetypical boogeyman stories, right? So that we have something that we can blame our fear on or cast our fear on or explain why it is that the woods at night seem scary when during the day they seem just fine. I remember as a mid-teen, I had just gotten my driver's license, and I drove home from somewhere in the dark, got to our little house in the woods, and no one else was there. I was all alone, and I felt fear. And I felt disgust that I felt fear. After all, I was 16 years old. I wasn't that little child shivering under the covers, worrying about Bigfoot breaking through my windows anymore. But I was afraid. I did not want to get out of my car. I did not want to walk into the house. And the last thing I wanted to do was dash from my car to the house and turn on all the lights and quiver. I finally decided it was time to face the fears. So I made myself get out of the car and walk into the woods in the pitch-black dark. No flashlight, no weapons, just me and whatever was out there. And I stayed out there for a long, long time. I think that may have been the last time that strong fear struck me in the woods. Since then, I have spent a lifetime of backpacking, mountaineering, exploring the forests in ecosystems all over the United States and even in other countries, and never have the woods scared me as they once did. I like to think of the forest or the woods or the wilderness or the mountains as my true home, and the house that I stay in as the place where I have to live until I can go back home again. When my oldest son was old enough to know fear of the dark, maybe 4, I remember he started expressing his fear of the darkness outside, and at this time, we lived in the forests in the Rocky Mountains. Once again, thousands of acres, mostly uninhabited around us. If there were ever to be a Bigfoot, we would have seen it there. We saw moose. We saw bears, lots of bears. We interacted with the deer, foxes, mountain lions, all the wildlife, bobcats. They were all there, but never a Bigfoot. But when my young son started being afraid, I said, okay, we're going to go on a walk. And I took him out, and we walked about 5 miles on those eerie, dark, pitch-black dirt roads through the forest without a light, so that he would know that the forest at night is good, that it's okay, that it's peaceful. And you know, he overcame his fear very, very quickly after that.
Oikos presents 15 Seconds of Strength.
Here we go. Steve's got a trunk full of groceries and no one to help him.
Oh, that's tough, Jim. Looks like a 5-trip load at least.
He grabs the first bag, the second. Bob, it looks like he's trying to do it all in one trip. He shimmies the door open, steps over the dog. Oh, and he stumbles.
Oh, right into the kitchen without missing a beat. Jim, now that's a man who eats his protein-packed Oikos.
With 15 grams of complete protein in each cup, Oikos Triple Zero can help build strength for every day. Oikos, stronger makes everything better.
Now fast forward several more years, that son is now in his mid-20s, and my wife and my daughter and my other two sons and the son that I spoke of have spent countless weekends and extended trips camping and backpacking and playing in the wilderness. It is our home and it is our playground. Yet, never have we seen anything or heard anything or experienced anything that could have been the elusive Sasquatch. That is, until this spring. My middle son was on spring break from his freshman year in college, and we felt like we needed to do something to celebrate time off from his freshman year. And because of circumstances surrounding this strange year, COVID-19 and other things that made planning difficult, he was having a spring break with no trip, with no celebration, with really nothing special. So we decided that we would take a road trip south. Just keep driving south until we found some warm air. And believe me, air where we were was not warm. We live in one of the coldest towns in the lower 48 states of North America. The rest of the family were all busy with other things, and this trip was really just a spontaneous extended weekend. But we jumped in the car and we headed south, and we took a tent, we took some warm sleeping bags and some camping gear, and the plan was to just find forest areas and places where we could do primitive car camping as we journeyed south to try to see what we would find deep in southern New Mexico. Now, our family has never been fans of campgrounds and things like that. We always like to just primitive camp, leave it better than we found it, and have more remote natural experiences. So we drove south, and we had to leave in the evening, so soon it was dark, and we drove, till about 11 o'clock at night. And we came to a small forest area with some forest access roads. We drove on frozen mud into an area of pinyon pines, scrub oaks, and juniper trees. And it had just the right amount of seclusion and the natural feel that we were looking for. It was quite cold, however, well below freezing, down into the 20s or the teens perhaps. But we pitched our tent and spread out our 0-degree bags, and soon we were snoozing away. But not for long. It turns out that there was a pack of coyotes in the area, and they were calling back and forth to each other as they hunted all night long. I finally suspected that there perhaps was even a den off in the distance that maybe had some young spring pups in there, and that the grown-up coyotes were going back and forth and yipping from a distance to communicate with the pups to make sure that everyone knew that everything was okay. But they hunted on all sides of our tent for most of the night, and there was lots of talk back and forth between these two groups of coyotes. And while it was delightful to hear, I didn't sleep a whole lot. We got up just before sunrise, and we got to watch the pink sunrise happen, and as the sun broke the horizon, a flock of greater sandhill cranes flew over. With their gurgling, honking, guttural noises that they make, there were probably well over 100 of these sandhill cranes that were making their annual migration north, having spent the winter in southern regions, and they are headed up to the Arctic where they can breed the next generation of sandhills. I just love mornings like this. The ground is frozen, there's frost everywhere, sandhill cranes flying over, other little birds and animals making their morning noises. This is what I live for. I live for moments like these. Did you know, just as an aside, that sandhill cranes lived with the dinosaurs? They somehow survived what the dinosaurs could not, and if their genetic memory could talk, we would know more about the dinosaurs than we will ever know by scratching through the dirt for a few fossils. As the sun began to warm the ground, we realized we'd probably better get out of there before the frozen road turned into muddy slop. So we had a quick breakfast, we struck our tent, and we were back in the car traveling south again. Our goal for this trip was to explore New Mexico, but also to try to find some warm spots, so we knew we had a lot of miles to cover to get far enough south to get out of the cold. So we jumped onto the interstate, and the miles went flying by. Soon we found ourselves all the way down near Bosque del Apache. For those who don't know, Bosque del Apache is a wetlands preserve where hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of different types of waterfowl come through every spring on their migrations, and they stop there to feed and rejuvenate themselves. And when we saw that we were at Bosque del Apache, it was, a couple hours before dark. But my son and I couldn't resist going in and seeing how many different types of birds that we'd never seen before we could spot. And of course, that took all of our time until, again, it was dark and we found ourselves driving into the night to try to find a place to sleep. Now, I don't know how many of you have experienced just this particular mix of ingredients, but you're traveling in a place you've not been before. The landscape is flying by, but you can't really see it. And you have a spot on a map where you think there might be open camping, primitive camping, but you're not sure, and you travel for a few hours further and further into the darkness. It's kind of an eerie feeling because you lose all context of what the land is around you and the context for the ecosystem and what things are like. Well, we finally ended up near Alamogordo and decided to drive up to Cloudcroft because there was forest land in that area where we thought surely we could find some open camping. It was now pretty late at night, and sure enough, we found a forest access road, and we had climbed all the way back up to about 8,000 feet in elevation. So our goal of finding the warmth was defeated by finding the elevation. Once again, it was a cold night. We found a place where we could camp deep in the forest, and all we could see is what the headlights illuminated, or what our little headlamps could make out. There's something that is so mysterious and fun about going into a brand new ecosystem in the night and not being able to see it until the morning light comes and you wake up and discover where you are. But it's also eerie. So we had a dinner, a quick dinner that we could cook on our camp stove, and then again we pitched the tent, and again it was cold, so we pulled out our 0-degree bags and tucked ourselves in for the night. But let me reiterate just a thing or two. It was dark. We had not seen where we were. We had driven for hours and hours in the darkness. We didn't know what the ecosystem was. We didn't know what kinds of trees there were or what kind of animals might be in the area. We just knew that we were deep in a high forest in the deep southern part of New Mexico. I've backpacked into the darkness many times and camped in the darkness waiting for the morning light to show me where I was. I've also done this car camping many times, but it never fails to unnerve me just a little bit. To go to sleep not knowing really where I am and what's around me. And this is where our Sasquatch story begins. We actually slept for about 5 hours, but then sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by a screeching, howling sound, ape-like even, that I had never heard before. Now, pause for a moment. I have spent a lifetime backpacking, playing in the woods, hiking, exploring ecosystems all over the nation, and I am hearing a sound that I have never ever heard before. It is loud, it is fierce, and it is completely unrecognizable. After listening to it for a few moments, I woke up Daniel because I wanted him to get to hear it too, and we laid there in our tent in the pitch black, listening. And guess what? We recorded it on our cell phones. Now, I played that one twice just so you could hear it. The only thing I did to that sound was turn up the volume and then a little noise reduction, because when I turned the volume up, it got pretty rowdy. So, once again, this is what we heard. And we didn't just hear it once. It went on and on and on for probably something like 15 minutes. And as I lay in my sleeping bag in the dark, letting my imagination run, I was trying to identify what it was. And while I'd never heard this exact sound, I had heard something that kind of reminded me of it. It was actually a bird, a great blue heron. Listen to this great blue heron and see what you think. And now for comparison, here is the beast in the woods again. Okay, clearly this thing is not a great blue heron. We knew that, but since we were deep down in southern New Mexico, near Mexico for that matter, I thought perhaps there was another bird that might make such a sound. We were speculating about that when it came much closer to the tent. Now, some of you might find this kind of funny, but there was another type of animal that I had in mind at this point. It sounds a lot more like this. The following recording is from my son's phone, from Dan's phone. A little explanation might be in order. In years past, I've called wild animals out of the woods by making similar calls to their own, or other sounds that can make them curious. And when they come too close, I simply tell them to go on, and they usually do. There's something about the human voice that drives most critters away. Of course, I've had to chuck a few sticks at bears who are not quite so shy. Bears are another thing. They don't always run. After all, they're bigger than me and have little to fear in the forest. So in this recording, first we hear it's getting really close, too close for comfort. Then I tell it to go on. But rather than running away, it screams back at me. Okay, now I'm thinking about things that are much bigger in the forest, things that need not fear smaller animals. You will hear me grab my headlamp, unzip my sleeping bag and the door to the tent. At this point, I'm expecting a standoff. Time to throw sticks. But as I stick my head out of the tent, I only catch its eyes up on the hill from us, and it runs off beyond the reach of my headlamp. Go on. Bird. What? Not a bird. What is it? Now keep in mind here that it was very dark, no moonlight, and that when I looked for the animal, it was, 50 feet away maybe, but it was up a hill a bit, so all I could see were eyes reflecting way up high, and I couldn't tell how high above the ground it was, but I could tell that it ran off kind of like it was on four legs, and I thought, well, that's a good sign maybe, because, well, I don't know, apes can also run on four legs, but at least it wasn't running on two legs for sure. At this point, we're pretty much thoroughly awake. You know, I should say, a sane person at this point in time might decide to load up the car and leave. Or maybe just leave. So, of course, Dan and I put on our jackets and our clothes and our headlamps and went chasing this thing down. We had to know what this was. Keep in mind, it's still pitch black and our headlamps aren't very bright, but we're scouring the area and we do see where it had scuffled up some of the pine needles as it ran away. Now, the ground was still frozen, so it couldn't leave good tracks. It's just like when a foot would skid, it would leave a tossed aside pine needles on the top of the frozen ground. But as we began searching the ground, we saw lots of trails of big things that had been going through and scuffing up the ground. And then I looked over my left shoulder and I saw it. About 100 yards from our tent was the mostly eaten carcass of a dead horse. So I walked up the hill to the horse and realized that whatever this thing was that had come to scream at us had come to finish off this carcass. And it was looking down about 100 yards from the carcass to the tent until I got so smart as to mouth off to it, and then it came even closer, and then finally I scared it away with my headlamp. I don't know what this thing is, but something big enough to kill a horse? Now, sure, a mountain lion could kill a horse. They take down elk all the time, so I'm thinking, well, a mountain lion could have killed it, but what I saw was not a mountain lion. And what I heard was not a mountain lion. So Dan and I are standing around this mostly eaten carcass, looking at each other, waiting for the sun to rise, looking over our shoulders, and we start tracking to see if we can find where it had come from. Sure enough, there are tracks all around the carcass, but again, they're just scuff marks. We can't get a good, clear track on the frozen ground. But as we travel across the top of the hill, we see that there's a worn trail where this thing had been coming back and forth to this carcass, back and forth to this carcass. But we couldn't find a good track, which was infuriating, especially because there were still big chunks of snow laying across the ground, and it didn't even walk across the snow. Well, we weren't sure what to think, but about this time, the sun began to rise a little bit. It was twilight, and we turned off our headlamps and started looking around us. We were shocked to find not one, not two, but 3 or more carcasses lying on the ground all around us. Now, 2 of them were remains of other horses. One was the remains of either a mule deer, perhaps. I don't even know if they're down there. I saw whitetail down there. Maybe it was just a small elk. We couldn't make it out because it was so mostly gone. But now we find out we're standing in a graveyard of carcasses, not just one, and that something had been taking these things down and finishing them off. Well, this gets really exciting. Now I'm wondering where that mountain lion might be. Or maybe something bigger than a mountain lion that has a taste for elk and for horse? I don't know. Well, we continued to scour the area, and we started finding a lot of interesting things. For one, we did find some mud that had softened enough that in the previous day or days, a small mountain lion had crossed it. And we could see that it was a mountain lion because of its retractable claws. As some of you probably know, dogs, like, well, anything in the canine family, their claws don't retract, so when they walk in the mud, they always leave claw marks. But mountain lions will retract their claws and walk on their pads of their feet until they start to slip or need to climb something, and then they'll stick their feline claws out and dig in. And so if you follow the tracks and you don't see claws and then you see the pointy claws, you know you've got a cat on your hands. So this was a small mountain lion that had been in the area, so our theory for mountain lion was getting pretty good. Then we started noticing the trees around the original horse carcass. They were all scratched up and had bled sap down the sides of them. And they were scratched up with this bleeding sap on the side facing the carcass. And as we moved away from the area, the rest of the trees were not scratched up. But those trees had their bark just shredded, all facing the carcass, which seemed very strange, especially because the scratches varied from 5 feet high to more than 10 feet high. Now, that kind of eliminates the idea that this could be a dog, because dogs don't climb trees. It could still be a cat, but I didn't understand why a cat would do that. And I have seen bears do just this very thing. Bears do this to mark their territory and to show how tall they are, but 5 feet is too short for a bear. So it's so confusing. What is chewing up these trees? What is killing these horses and elk? What is waking us up in the middle of the night? Okay, the sun finally broke the horizon at about this time, and we notice that there are some crows or ravens making a ruckus over the hill, maybe a quarter mile away, so we decide to go check that out. As we come over the hill, I see 2 bald eagles take flight and soar through the trees. Beautiful, giant bald eagles, and a small murder of crows or ravens took off and flew up from the ground, and sure enough, I could just make out a lump there too. So Dan and I went down to this one, and it was another dead horse. This one had been killed recently. Its throat was torn out, its trachea was hanging out, there was blood in the carcass still dripping, and we were a little bit spooked. Now, you would think, just look at the ground, the dirt right around this horse carcass. Surely there's some prints there. No, just about 1,000 crow and eagle prints that had churned the soil so we couldn't see what had taken that horse down. Crazy, crazy times. Well, as you might imagine, we spent the next few hours trying to solve the mystery. We looked for other signs, maybe some hair, maybe a print, maybe anything that could let us know what killed the horse. Now, I had wondered about wolves. It just so happened we had a little bit of coverage, so we were able to search and find that there were some wolves that had been reintroduced into parts of New Mexico, but more research revealed that they had not been brought into this part of New Mexico. So much for wolves. Besides, it didn't sound like a wolf. Coyotes? Well, coyotes can't bring down a horse. Sorry, they're just not big enough. And besides, the previous night we had been serenaded by coyotes for most of the night. We know what coyotes sound like. What was this thing? Go on.
What? Not a bird. What is it?
Well, we finally decided it was time for breakfast. And we made some French toast on a cook stove and were just enjoying it when, believe it or not, the Fish and Wildlife Service drove by on the nearby road with some sort of a cage in the back of the truck. We thought, oh great, here's somebody that can help us figure out what this thing is. So we quickly put our food away and stowed it in the car inside of the ice chest and everything. Obviously, we did not want to leave food out at this time. And then we jumped in the car and took off and could not find the truck. Now, we weren't sure, of course, if that was a warden or a ranger or who it was, but regardless, we spent another couple of hours exploring the forest, and we did find herds of wild horses, which was a really cool thing to see. These were feral horses that had escaped from ranches, over the full history of the United States probably, who lived in that high forest in wild herds. So at least we knew where the horses came from. But what had killed all those horses and that elk? And what made that strange noise outside of our tent? Oh, and there's part of the story that I hadn't told you yet. We, of course, talked back and forth in the tent a little bit, and when we made voice noises, then off in the distance we heard a large stick, strike a tree. Thunk! And it echoed through the forest. Now that seemed pretty strange, but, one weird noise, it could be one of those horses breaking a stick, maybe, that just snapped in that particular way. But what you couldn't hear on the recording because it was too faint is that when I told the beast to go on, there was another stick that banged against a tree, but this time on the other side of the tent. Not where the animal was that we were confronting, but off in the distance. Now, what is picking up sticks and banging them against trees? Now, what do you think it was that we encountered in that high forest above Alamogordo, near Cloudcroft, New Mexico? What might have been that strange animal that screeched at us in the night, that ran off when my headlamp hit its eyes, and that had potentially killed all these horses and the elk? Any ideas? Now, for you conspiracy theorists out there, this could be even more fun. On the way into Alamogordo, we drove by Trinity, the Trinity Site, to be more precise. That was the place where the first atomic bomb in the history of mankind was set off. That's right, Trinity, New Mexico, not far away. Oh, and if we were to continue east, we would end up in a special little place called Roswell, New Mexico. Perhaps you've heard of this, Roswell, New Mexico, and the aliens there. Oh, and White Sands Missile Range is right there, actually touching the Trinity Site. So we have military, top secret operations, we have Roswell, we have the site of the first atomic bomb. Oh man, you conspiracy theorists could take that and run with it. If there was ever a place where we should see a Bigfoot alien from a UFO, then this would be it. Absolutely. Is that what happened? Well, Dan and I aren't really the conspiracy types, so we went down into Cloudcroft and we called the sheriff's office just because we needed more information. And the sheriff patched us through to the Wildlife Service, and an officer from the Wildlife Service met with us, and we played him the recording. Now, we'd had so much fun with this. We had spent hours trying to solve this mystery, and within a quarter second of hearing the recording, the officer knew exactly what it was. And some of you might know what it is as well. He just simply said, "Oh, that's a coyote." A coyote? I have heard coyotes my entire life. I know what they sound like. And without hesitation, without blinking, he just said, "Oh, that's a coyote." Of course, then, he and his partner couldn't resist making jokes about chupacabra and skinwalkers as they got back in their truck. We thanked them for their time, but really, our hopes were a little dashed. I mean, after all, how great would it be to have a mystery that really couldn't be solved? But that said, I thought I might leave the final determination up to you. Do coyotes pick up sticks and bang them against trees? Do coyotes kill horses and elk? And here's one more sound for you. This is the sound that I know to be coyotes. I'd love to leave the mystery right there, but the truth of the matter is, I think that the officer was correct. It must have been a coyote making some very strange coyote noises. But I can say this, coyotes don't kill horses, and coyotes don't pick up sticks and bang on trees. The mystery lives on just a little bit, as it should. Why else would we go to the woods if it's not to find things that we don't understand and to experience new experiences, the magic that's real and is out there? I hope you enjoyed that little story about our trip to southern New Mexico and all the fun that we had and the mysteries that we encountered there. The non-bluegrass music that you heard is all original, written by Caleb Linville, and that little guitar riff at the end, that was Luke Linville. Thank you again for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast today, and I hope you enjoyed that little Sasquatch encounter episode. You know, it was a lot of fun to put together. It was even more fun to experience it. And please do, if you enjoyed this, then please do give us a rating, a comment, a thumbs up, whatever format you're on. We appreciate the support. And please do subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thank you, friends. And until next time, get out there and have some fun.